Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Subscribing to My Podcast. Because I have a new guest featured every week, it makes it very difficult to maintain consistent viewership. So if there's one thing that you can do to support me or the guest featured on the show, it's by interacting with my channel in every way that you can. You can always decide to unsubscribe later if you decide that you hate me or my show. With that plugging aside, enjoy my discussion with... Lisa Woolley has been the center of arguably the most famous and tragic DHS case in Oklahoma history. Their family story has made headlines for over 7 years with court cases, interviews, documentaries, news stories over the heinous and malicious taking of their grandson. Truthfully, this kind of content is out of my wheelhouse because the affected party has such an incredible story to tell despite it being so tragic, so viewer discretion is advised. Lisa Woolley, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the viewers of this episode and then tell them some of the important things that they should know about you. And then obviously this will probably come with your guys' story and a little bit of what happened to you and then how that looks in the future. But just go ahead and introduce yourself and then tell some of the viewers some important things they should know about you.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, I'm Lisa Woolley. I'm married to Bill, and I have 3 grown children. And I had 2 grandchildren, 2 boys, and one of them passed. One of them, his name is Clayton. We're still fighting to get him back into our lives. We moved to Oklahoma in 2000. We've been here ever since. We came from Michigan. And my husband had a job offer, and that's how we ended up here in this area. Anything else you need to know?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. One of the reasons why I found you and I reached out to you was this just incredibly tragic story involving the 2 grandkids that you had mentioned, and then how both of those stories kind of played on top of each other. If you're comfortable, I would like for you to kind of explain this situation to the viewers who aren't familiar with it, or to re-engage some of the viewers who do know about you and do know about the story, because I think it's really important in talking about some of the later stuff that I think we'll get to.
Oh, to condense that is going to be challenging. It's 7.5 years.
Yeah, take
7.5 years of twists and turns. Okay.
Right.
My oldest daughter has struggled with addiction. And it started when she was 15. She was playing with some friends and her tooth got broken in half. The nerve was exposed. The doctor put her on opioids, and it was a slippery slope since then. So it was an area of she was vulnerable in, apparently. But as it turned out, when she was 18, I believe, she became pregnant with Clayton. And it was only within a few months that we realized we really had to do something. Really had to step in, because she just wasn't in a good place, and she wasn't, comprehending what he really needed. And then about 4.5 years later, she had another son named Elijah. And so we ended up having to take custody of him as well, to protect him, which she ended up being very grateful for, especially when she started getting help. So she did get herself into a program. She's done that a couple times. Had a hard time getting her footing under her, but she has been slowly over time making some measurable steps and growing stronger. So, but the thing we went through for the last 7.5 years was a real setback, because I think the majority of the trauma that she's having to now try to process came from that. And so what that was is, on March 30th of 2018, I went we got Clayton ready for school, sent him off to school, and he slept in the same room with his little brother, Elijah, who was a year old. And so I went in to feed Elijah. He still liked a bottle. He hadn't stirred, and it was kind of getting later in the morning, and so I knew he wasn't feeling well the night before. He had a slight fever, teething, drooling, food allergies, severe constipation. We always had to deal with that when it came to him. We had to put a liquid laxative in every bottle. And I think I'm guessing he was a little underdeveloped because of her, struggle with meth while she carried him. And so it took some catching up. He had to do some catching up. Anyway, that morning, Clayton went off to school, and I went in to get the fluid started because he was acting so constipated again. So I was concerned about him getting enough fluids so that the constipation wouldn't be made worse. But when I went in, I was startled because as I approached his bed, it's like my heart skipped a beat because he looked to me like his body was in the same position that I laid him the night before, and as if he hadn't moved all night, which with a 1-year-old, they're very active, and they're never in the same position. In the morning, his Thomas the Train blanket was still draped over his shoulders, and it's just startled me. And then I reached for him, and it was evident that he was gone. I screamed. My youngest daughter, 17, in the room next door, came running. I screamed, "Call 911, call 911." So we called 911. The first people here was the fire department, and they're just like a half a block away, so that's probably why they were here so quickly. They looked at, checked the baby, and came back out into the hallway. My youngest daughter was saying, she wanted answers, and they said, "We're really sorry. It just looks like a classic case of SIDS." And so anyway, pretty soon other people started coming. The DHS, our CPS people started coming, and the sheriff's department people started coming, and I don't know. There was a detective who was leading the investigation, Danny Elliott, and I've gotten past the point of holding names back anymore, so I'm just going to say it. But anyway, so he has a personal conviction. He feels like he has a personal revelation from God that there's no such thing as a SIDS death. A child can't die from an unknown cause. So that means it has to be murder. So on the way there to the scene, he hadn't been there yet, he told his supervisor, and he stopped at the judge's house before starting the investigation. And he told both of them, I already know this is a murder because there's no such thing as SIDS. So he came in, with that predetermination. Come to find out down the line, it came out in one of the transcripts that his own childhood is pretty horrible, pretty horrible. And there is a lot of abuse in his past, and then his relatives have gone through a lot. And you can tell it's big wounds, it's unresolved issues, and they never got justice. Apparently, there's some things that happened against their family that they never got justice for. And so I think that unresolved issue in him causes him to project onto other people and trying to fix a situation that happened a long time ago. And really, they don't really require any psychological testing or anything when they hire people like him. He doesn't have a college degree or anything. So, but that's what kicked it all off. So he came in with his mind made up. He put us outside. I had a sense, as soon as I saw him, that there was something, that he was angry, that he had a chip on his shoulder. I didn't know what it was about. I just knew that that's what I sensed. And I'm pretty sensitive to things like that. So anyway, 2 weeks later, he went the next morning. They took the baby's body. Well, they took the baby's body that day, but it was Easter weekend. So this happened on Good Friday. And then Saturday, they did the autopsy at the local Tulsa ME, which he attended. The detective with a special revelation attended this autopsy, and swears he didn't say anything to try to influence her. who knows, you know. So, but there was a whole lot of evidence and things that he ethically, I guess, professionally, ethically, should have disclosed to her so that she could make the best possible, come to the best possible conclusion. But there's all kinds of evidence that he didn't apprise her of or take with him. He left a lot of exculpatory evidence at the scene, and we did notify so that they could come and get it, but they didn't want it. For example, he ended up accusing us of murdering the baby and also sodomizing the baby and trying to say that we did that every day in the open living room with the whole family watching. And it was just bizarre. But anyway, so that was his accusation. And that's what started out. And then, but they needed to, well, anyway, back to the information that he's not giving her. We had here about 2 weeks worth, which would have been about 30 dirty diapers, because we forgot to take the trash out the week before, so we had a bunch. And when we saw that all that was, they did the investigation, they left all that behind, we were concerned. We're like, okay, they're making this accusation against us. Surely they're going to want these diapers, to check for DNA, and they didn't take any of them. And so we called and said, hey, somebody needs to come and get these and have them analyzed. It should be a gold mine for you. But they didn't come for them. Also, there was a white cotton mattress pad that I laid the baby on the night before. I know mattress pads generally go under sheets, but in this case, I put it on top because he was drooling so much. I just didn't want him to choke on the drool or something. So anyway, there was a huge 18-inch, I have it in the other room, 18-inch fluid stain on it of whatever it was that came out of him when he passed, which I think probably had a lot to do with lung fluid, because she did say, the ME did say that he had pneumonia in one of his lungs, yet she wrote that off as non-contributory. So she wasn't apprised of a lot. There's a lot of things that would be there if this accusation was true, that would have been there, that weren't there. For example, in the ME report, she alleged lacerations, severe lacerations. So automatically you're going to know, okay, well, that means there's going to be blood in the diaper, there's going to be blood on the stool, there's going to be blood in the rectum, or anywhere she might say there was a laceration, there would be. So what they do is they take what they call sections, and they take little pieces of tissue and they analyze them, put them under the microscope, and they check to see if there's blood infiltration, because wounds involve blood infiltration. Whether you get shot or whether it's a contusion or a bruise under the surface, it always involves blood infiltration. So you can look in the section or the sample, and if there's blood, you know that there's some kind of a wound from some source. She never found any blood. All the sections were clean. That was confirmed by experts that came behind her, who also checked those under a microscope. So the experts that came later, and there were over the last several years, there's been 6 unrelated experts that have come on. Some of them are world-renowned. Some of them are nationally renowned. Some of them are top in the state. But they all agreed with each other's findings. Maybe didn't come to the conclusion exactly the same way, but it was evident to them that scientifically it wasn't possible what was being alleged. But they pushed it through. They pushed it through anyway. And the detective, when he interviewed us, he asked if we would take lie detector tests, which we jumped on that fast, like, oh, please, as many as you want, anybody in our family you want, And then as we were leaving, after the initial interviews, he was walking us out and taking us to the back door to our cars. My gut just told me that he might not really do it. And so I went up to him and I kind of got in his face. Very polite, but I just said, promise me, give me your word that you will get those tests for us. And so he and Mr. Weber, who was I don't know what you call him, his assistant sidekick or whatever, promised that somebody would be contacting us on Monday and they'd get that set up. Never happened. Never happened. They did 2 DNA tests at 2 different times, checking for DNA, any kind of DNA, and found nothing. Both tests came back clean. They took all of our media because they figured, well, there's going to be some kind of pornography on there, and that was all clean. All of our phones, all of our computers, iPads, everything was clean. But they still pushed it forward. I have to believe I think that they just got ahead of themselves and it was embarrassing to go backwards. That's what I think. And so they just kind of kept pushing it forward. So 2 weeks later, we go to court thinking we're going for something else, going there for guardianship renewal of Clayton, something, with getting that worked out. And we come up to the judge's bench. We were called up to the judge's bench, and the detective and then Mr. Weber came out of the back room, slapped cuffs on us. We were just like in shock because we kept telling ourselves, well, this is all going to work itself out. It's going to be so obvious. They're going to see the truth and this will all be resolved. And we didn't know how it couldn't be. So anyway, they took Bill and I to jail and they booked us in and we were there for 4 months. Now the charge at that time wasn't against hurting the baby. They needed a way to get us in there and hold us, I think. And so they they accused us of abusing Clayton. He was 5. So now they had put Clayton through about 6 interviews, which the experts say when you interview a child, you do 1. Because after that, the child can start sensing what it is you're wanting from them. And they, want to please you or want to get done with the interview or something. So anyway, he did 1. It was exonerating. So then they did a SANE nurse exam, SANE, sexual abuse nurse examiner. She's supposed to do a physical exam to check for, they did a rape kit, which they did on the baby as well, I guess. Those were clean. Check for like struggle marks of, like fighting, struggling. He was clean. He was just clean. In every regard, he was clean. But she alleges that they started talking and he disclosed all this horrendous stuff, which that was the only interview of all 6 of them that wasn't recorded, didn't have any witnesses in the room. And so there was no way to really, it was what you call a hearsay. And actually there was even an interview before that first one with the forensic interviewer. There was one at the school. They went to Clayton's school and he had no awareness of what had happened that day or that his brother had died that day and all the hubbub going on here. He didn't have any idea of it. So that investigator interviewed him and he asked him questions like, so what happens in your house when people get hurt? And he said, no, nobody gets hurt in my house. And then he said, well, the interview says that he said, what are you afraid of, in your house? Who makes you afraid? What are you afraid of? He said, I'm not afraid of anything but rattlesnakes. Anyway, just, very direct questions, but very direct answers. He didn't know what they were talking about. Then they went to that forensic interview, which also exonerated us and matched the first interview. The third one would have been the SANE nurse interview. And that's the one, like I said, which there's no way to really be sure of what took place in there. We found about 25 discrepancies in her one-page handwritten report that she wrote a few hours after her time with Clayton. So she says that he says all these horrible things that would be complete opposite of what the first two said. So the DA is like getting excited about that, I think. So he orders another forensic interview to kind of capture that, so that it's recorded. So they bring him back a few days later to another forensic interview and goes through, I think the first one was, of the forensic interviews, was about an hour and a half. This one I think was about an hour. But you can follow it and you can read her frustration, and you can hear in the background who sounds like the detective kind of telling her what to say and what to ask, and a couple other people talking in the background. But so she's seeming a little frustrated by the end of the interview, like, Clayton, didn't you just tell the nurse a few days ago, the same nurse a few days ago, about, brother's butt and brother's privates and what happened? And he looked at her, apparently, and he just said, no. Like, he didn't seem to have any knowledge of that conversation, which didn't really shock me because I really felt like she had been influenced. She was new in the field. I think it was she just gotten over her first year, and I'm sure she wanted to make her mark. And I just feel like she was kind of vulnerable. I think all you would have had to say to someone like her is, you might be this child's only hope, And she could feel maybe some pressure to have to kind of come up with something. And then in one of the interviews, it shows there's a place where the detective says to my husband, says that he actually was having correspondence with her, talking to the forensic interviewer and the sane nurse while their interviews were going on. So we're like, I wonder what was being said during all that. So anyway, so then there's the fourth one, again, that, after the sane nurse interview. And Clayton denies ever having such a conversation. He makes other things clear. So those interviews all corroborate with each other. And then there's a couple more that DHS did over time. I think, a few weeks later, they interviewed him at the home of the foster family they put him with. And she says he was getting upset because he wanted to go home back to his family. And the foster mom said to him, no, you don't. Remember all the horrible things that Papa did to you? Which, of course, we're not supposed to do. We're not supposed to say anything to influence a child, but there it is in the report. So there was a couple more reports like that. So it was a mess. So after 4 months in jail, we had a preliminary hearing, and the sane nurse was put on the stand to be examined and cross-examined. And so I think it was a bad day for her because she was on there almost all day, and she was a wreck by the time she left because she could not answer the questions and be consistent. She kept changing her story and changing the facts. She said things like, well, they said to her, why did you not send Clayton out refer him out for aftercare, like to a counselor, a psychologist, doctor, because they're saying, the accusation was that they were saying that Clayton watched his baby brother be brutally murdered in cold blood every day, with the whole family watching. Neighborhood kids running in and out, can I have a popsicle? So just nutty stuff. But anyway, so that was what they were alleging, and that he watched him be, molested and murdered. So none of that made any sense, but she couldn't answer the question why she didn't see the need to send him out to get support and get help because of all the trauma that he'd been through. Supposedly, he said that one time he was in the shower and Papa's pee-pee touched his butt one time in the shower, and that I saw it happen, which wasn't true. And he likes to play in the bath. He doesn't really like showers. He likes to play with his floaty toys and stuff like that. So I I knew what she was trying to refer to, but I knew that it had all been, I don't know what the word is. A lot of it was just lies. It was just lies, but some of it there would be like a grain of truth. I could recognize, okay, that would be something he would say,
Like
and then
taken
they
out
would
of
build,
context.
yeah, or just kind of extrapolate, build a story around it,
Yeah.
So, so anyway, it wasn't the things he said at all, but she wouldn't get him any aftercare, so that was one of the things they questioned on the stand. Like, why would you not do that? If this kid went through everything you said he did, he must be severely traumatized. And she said, I didn't. And they said, well, why didn't you? And she said, well, because he was fine. And they said, like, what do you mean he was fine? She's like, he wasn't traumatized. So they're like, well, in what way was he not traumatized? She said, well, he wasn't traumatized psychologically or emotionally, and he wasn't traumatized physically, and his rape kit was clean. Things like that. There was just a whole lot of things that she quoted him as speaking. Clayton said this, and it's kind of like street slang the way he answered, according to her, which he doesn't know street slang. He's never heard it. So I'm like, that's not him. So I was reading that report. I'm like, that's not him. That's not him, So it just was a slippery slope. And, you get the DA put his stamp of approval on it. The judge takes the affidavit without checking the facts in the background, puts his stamp of approval on it. And they just kind of push it through. And then at the end of that preliminary hearing, which was an all-day event, my bond, which was $500,000. By the way, these documents, most of them are public, so you could look them up. These transcripts and stuff. Anyway, so they had mine. I lost my train of thought. That's what happens when you get old.
You had a bond of 500,000.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, and my husband did too. So we have this preliminary hearing, and they question the SANE nurse, and then at the end of it, they decide they're going to drop my bond to only 10% of what they wanted, and my husband to 20%. So the attorneys were like floored. They're like, that never happens. They're telling us, So we get out, and then we're out for 4 months. Meanwhile, they take our youngest daughter to a multi-county grand jury. And I don't know if you know anything about grand juries. There are one-sided hearings because only the accuser gets to bring their witnesses and their evidence, and they can show as little or as much as they want, unless they're ethical. If they're ethical, they're supposed to show evidence from both sides. But they didn't ever make any mention of the diaper or the mattress pad or the fact that there was no DNA and no lie detector tests and no pornography. All of that was left out. So they pushed that through. I think they wanted her to roll over on us, but my daughter, they underestimated her because she's a Spitfire. And she just, I guess 97, 98% of the time, a grand jury investigation will yield a conviction or what do you call it when you get an indictment. So after them seeing all the evidence and talking to all the witnesses and then talking to my daughter, the multi-county grand jurors said, this is crazy. They said, we're not going to indict. It didn't make sense to them. So we fell into that rare 2% of people that didn't get indicted. But they still, like a few days before Christmas, they decided to push it through anyway. So the detective went and made a new affidavit, 29 points. They never ended up using the 29 points, but he just filled up a bunch of space and took it into the judge, and the judge kind of rubber stamped it. Didn't check for jurisdiction, didn't check statute of limitations, which it had exceeded. Jurisdiction wasn't even right. And then they changed the charges, which altogether they changed the charges against our family 26 times. So they were either amended or altogether new charges, or anyway, they just kept changing them. We felt like they were just throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to get something to stick. So, but those later charges, they decided that they would drop the murder, they dropped the child sexual abuse. Now they were decided that we were guilty of neglect. And my husband and I were guilty of neglect. Now okay, they put us back in jail a second time, by the way, just before Christmas for 4 more months. But anyway, they decided that we were guilty of neglect. And the charges were that we were guilty of neglect because we didn't make our 24-year-old daughter go to the doctor often enough when she was pregnant. Never mind that she didn't live with us and we didn't know where she lived. You know what I mean? But it was our responsibility to make this adult do that, and she got some charges. And then they brought her in and they put her in jail. And I really believe that it was also for leverage, to try to get her to turn on us, or for us to say, please don't hurt my children. Okay, we'll accept this charge. We'll accept this plea deal or whatever. Because they did offer a few plea deals through this process. And one of the most bizarre was one that came shortly before they dropped the last of all the charges. And that was when the DA's office called Bill's attorney's office and said that he had a deal for us. And the deal was that if we would turn Clayton over to the guardian mom, the foster mom, and let her have him, they would arrange for us to have generous visitation to include holidays and sporting events, and they would drop the last of the felony charges. So, that was really, really difficult because I want to see him so bad. I would have been a little vulnerable to almost take anything, you know what I mean? But then, I started to come to my senses and I'm like, wait a minute. If he thinks we're guilty of murder and hurting children, how could he offer us to have visitation? Somebody who murders kids? It just didn't make any sense. And so we're like, that didn't make sense. Meanwhile, the media was getting hot and heavy and coming, not showing some things that didn't put them in a very good light. And they were getting, pardon my French, pissed off. So they were mad. A new report came out that Friday. I think it was Friday. We were supposed to meet on Monday to discuss this offer. And when Monday came, they were really mad about the Fox News piece that came out. So they said they were pulling the offer off the table. So, which is for the better because, looking back on it, I'm like, I don't think they would have ever kept their promise. But anyway, finally, we got arrested again. This time, I'm still having a $500,000 bond. This time, they're not just accusing my husband, they're accusing me and saying I killed the baby and I molested the baby. So anyway, they didn't give my husband a bond at all. Just not $1 million, nothing. He just wasn't supposed to get out for any reason. So 4 months later, we go to another preliminary hearing. This time, we have one of the top chief medical examiners and published child abuse experts in the nation come and testify about his findings. He reviewed everything in the autopsy. He looked at the tissue samples. He did everything that you could possibly do. And he was on the stand most of the day. They also had interviewed a few days before that my youngest daughter, who was here, when I cried out for help. Her and the detective, which was a joke. Anyway. Then a few days later, we had this other one, and that's with the daycare owner. So they interviewed her on the stand, or what we call interview, cross-examined, cross-examined on the stand. And what was interesting about having the daycare owner come in is that the detective in the beginning, you would think that as a detective, the first thing you're going to want to do in a situation like this is you're going to want to talked to everybody who gave care to the children. Daycare, teachers, coaches. I mean, he was in sports. Sunday school teachers, all that. But he didn't. He didn't go to any of them. Even Elijah's paternal grandparents. They ended up giving legal statements about their experience because they had visitation with Elijah. It was usually on a weekend, and we had made an agreement that they could have him for a 12-hour day. And the father was also struggling with meth, so our agreement was that they had to be there when the father was there, just because we wanted to make sure that my daughter was stable before she spent time with him alone, and that the father was stable. So anyway, they wrote theirs, and they said we've had him, been visiting him for this long, never seen a mark on him. He's always well taken care of. We changed a lot of diapers, did some baths, never saw a mark on him, never saw any traumatizing or concerning behavior. He was always amiable, loving, playful. So all this is, we get to the second preliminary thing, and this expert just demolishes point by point. He showed how this, and he had slides and everything. This isn't possible because of this. In this case, you would look for this. That wasn't there. You would look for this. That wasn't there. No signs of struggle, no blood, just a whole big litany of things. And so he tore it up. He tore it up. So at the end of that, the defense said, well, we're going to drop the bonds to $12,500 a piece. But I'm like, why don't they just let it go? I mean, it's so obvious it was a joke, but I don't think that they had permission from the DA. I don't think the ADAs had permission from them to let it go yet. So they pushed it through. So we are out again, and we've been out ever since. Meanwhile, everything else was, dismissed on the 26th of March of 2021. So after that, there was nothing. But so we're thinking, okay, well, they're going to give Clayton back, because they've cleared us. And the DA said on camera or on public, he made a public statement. And he said, at one time, our office believed that they were guilty of murder and, these crimes, but we cannot say that now. And so, we're dismissing all the charges. He said other things similar like that. Two different places where he talked to people. We have letters where it shows that he was considering dismissing everything with prejudice, meaning it can never come back on you again. They can't resurrect it down the line. But then we started fighting for Clayton, and the more we fought, the more they dug in their heels. And we're just like, just to tell us what we have to do to be reconciled. Do we need to go to a reconciliation trauma counselor with him? What do we need to do, to start getting him back in our lives? But they were holding on. And to this day, they are holding on to him. They took him that day, the day after we found the baby deceased, and we haven't seen him or talked to him since. We haven't been able to talk to him on the phone, see him in person, give him a birthday gift, send him a postcard, send him a smoke signal. Nothing at all. And it's not just us. Every member of his family, all his relatives, distant relatives, neighbors, school personnel, friends at school, they yanked him out of that school. In one moment of time, everyone he ever knew and everyone he ever had a connection with or was familiar with was gone. He's never seen anybody again. So it was very, very traumatizing for him. He went into a lot of anxiety. They put him on lots of medications. He had to wear a weighted vest in school. been horrible. It's been horrible. So we've been fighting for him all these years. We've had billboards all over the city. We've had petitions. We've had protests, at DHS, because DHS worked so closely with the DA, and they all work together. And there's paperwork in there that shows where they made plans to work together. I think they're supposed to function independently, but it wasn't how they did it in this case. So we've probably been in the news about 40 or 50 times. We've testified at the Capitol building. We're going to be testifying again there on the 28th. Been in several interviews. And recently, I don't know if I should say or not. Anyway, we have somebody, it's one of the lead people in the state that is wanting to review the case. So we hope that that's an honest effort. We've had a lot of people come alongside of us and like legislators, oh, we're going to get to the truth. We're going to bring it all out. We're not putting up with this. And they get into it and then they find out it's going to be work. And there's a lot of documents to study and a lot of people to interview, and they don't always follow through. So we're hoping that this will be different. We just keep fighting for him. And now he's in a situation where he's abused. My daughter, when she was still in her drug addiction, she was dating the woman that he's with is a paternal aunt, somebody he'd never met before. They never wanted to see him. We had offered after he was born and when he was young, and they said, you keep him away from us. He's your problem, not ours. So he never knew them. But suddenly, when all this happened, they're suddenly wanting him, and we can't figure out why. People have speculated that, the DHS sweetened the pot. Turns out they were paying him to take him, and even now are continuing to pay them. So they might have something to do with it. But anyway, he's been running away. I don't know how many times. He might have 12 times or more he's run away. He goes to neighbors' houses to try to get in and try to seek safety. The police come and haul him back again. He said to the neighbors, I'm going to kill myself if I have to go back there. They're so mean to me. Please, please don't make me go back. Don't make me go back. Well, she works for the police department. And these are the same police that keep hauling him back. She works in one of the divisions of the police department. So anyway, all this abuse has been going on now, and after a while, other people start popping up. He starts disclosing to school personnel, and they start reporting it to DHS. And then there's co-workers of hers that have witnessed for 4+ years the abuse that's going on with him. And he had 2 half-brothers, too, who are experiencing that abuse. So and everybody's confirming exactly what he was telling the neighbors and exactly what he was telling the school personnel. It's like, yep. It all fits, But they won't do anything about it. In fact, DHS doesn't want to hear any more call-ins or referrals from people that are concerned when they've said so. And I don't know how many there's been. I think 15, 20, something like that. So it's just like a giant, huge cover-up. And we never knew these people, the sheriff's department, nobody that ever knew us before. We didn't know them before. It's just like this revelation that the detective had. He was going to stand by it and prove it no matter what. And it just, all it takes is one lie, and you can build a whole story around it, and you can totally destroy a family, totally devastate a family. So he's still in this abusive situation. We've appealed to lots of people. If you see the documentary Saving Clayton, you'll see that the governor's father has been a huge advocate tried hard to get his son to act, who saw about 4 years of abuse but didn't want to get messy. So that's been really disappointing. He's still in that environment, but last July, the brothers, the half brothers, they're in a co-guardianship. The grandmother of the half brothers is in a co-guardianship with the abusive guardian mom. The grandmother had the boys on a visit, and the youngest one started to disclose a lot of abuse. And then I guess my understanding is over the weeks that followed, more and more started coming out, and then they started talking about more. So she was just livid. I mean, she was mad at herself, like, how did I not see these signs, you know? And so she went and got a PO and never took them back. So here it is, a year later. They've never been back, but the guardian mom is fighting her in court to get full custody, and the grandmother is fighting to get full custody. And the allegations of abuse are, I guess, pretty irrefutable. I mean, it's like, my understanding is that basically they haven't denied it, and the pictures and everything else. So that's still up in the air. At the same month in July, it was on July 4th, a coworker that she's worked with for 4 years comes forward and does an interview and details, graphic details, about the abuse that he's witnessed working with her all these years, and of course it matches everything else. So the situation is still going on, and it's almost like it's come down to where there's maybe like a unspoken or maybe spoken thing where it's just like, if you hear something that contradicts that this happened, then it's just a Woolley ploy. And so people's eyes glaze over and they stop thinking critically, they stop looking at evidence, they stop reading documents. They're like, oh yeah, it's just another, they'll do anything, those Woolleys, they'll try anything. And they're right. But we were not going to break the law to do it. We're not going to lie. So, but we would. I mean, we'll die on this hill. And if there's one thing he's going to know that we've never stopped fighting. We never relented. And then even if he has to wait till he's 18, apparently he's told him at school, he's like, other kids, when they badmouth their families or complain about their parents, he says, you shouldn't do that. He said, I have to wait 5 more years to see mine. So I'm grateful, so grateful that he hasn't forgotten us, because that was a worry, that was a fear. It's like, what if he forgets? He was so young, but he still remembers us. There's counselor reports where it says he's always speaking fondly of his memories of being here. And but they just, I think because she works for the police department in one of their divisions, that they just figure, well, she must be telling the truth. You know what I mean? So anyway, this is the big fiasco that is developed, and I don't know if I'm leaving out anything important. There's so many tweets. There's about 15 legislators that are pulling for us to various degrees, really demanding that this be looked into. And the DHS just keeps digging in their heels, and so does the DA. And now the DA's in trouble now because the citizens of the county, Wagner County, have recently circulated a petition that a judge approved to have him investigated, not because of our case, but because of lots of other cases where there's been a lot of cover-up and a lot of evil stuff that's gone on. So I think about 4,000 to 4,500 people have signed that petition, and it's been brought to the attention of the Attorney General. And so anyway, there's a big outcry. The whole county is in what would you say, like an uproar. Is just everybody's concerned, that everybody wants to see this pattern exposed, which, when this happened with the petition, I was kind of glad, because I was like, this is what we've been telling people all this time. The same things that these petitioners are saying, It's so, it's kind of confirming. Now, whether somebody will do the right thing, here we are in an election season for some people. And so a lot of people who have a lot of authority and clout who could help, we pray to God that they will. Hopefully they will. But I know that everyone's weighing their decisions very carefully right now if they're running, so we'll see. We have some irons in the fire right now. We're hoping that something pans out here soon. Maybe we'll check back with you when we find out how that's going to go. But anyway, we're just fighting our way through. We know that he knows that we're fighting for him. There's students, even his own classmates, sometimes have approached us at events or emailed us and said, yeah, I'm Clayton's, classmate. And apparently he'd been telling them about abuse for many years, and they just thought he was being crazy, But then when they heard the rest, they're like, oh my gosh, he was telling the truth, So, and then he seems to know there's a documentary about him because he told somebody, he said, there's a movie about me, the Saving Clayton documentary. So I'm glad because I think all these things help him have the assurance that we are fighting for him. One of the documents says that from a counselor, one of his counselors, it says that Clayton says he wants to be with his family again, but the judge won't let me. So he seems to know that it's not us, it's them. And what we've learned through all of this is that, I always say this now, the DHS will say, well, sorry, we can't do anything about it. Judge made the final decision and placed him with this guardian mom. But what they don't say is that they lead them to that conclusion. I always say the judge is the head, but the DHS is the neck that turns the head. The DHS can come into the courtroom. They can show whatever evidence they want or not. Show as much or as little as they want, spin it any way they want, and thereby bring it to lead the judge to become biased or become angry or over time, and we really saw that happen. This judge has really dug her heels in. She's basically said from the stand, from the bench, that she's going to do everything in her power to keep him from our family. And we see the DA doing the same thing, even though he was saying at one point, that we could have all of our charges cleared, our attorneys could move to have them cleared, and he didn't, and with dismissal, and he wasn't opposed to that. And then he got angry and offended, and he went back the other way. But what we're seeing with him now is he's so desperate right now because his whole world's falling apart and probably needs to. His primary tool, and you see this sometimes wherever there's corruption in the legal system, in counties where there's corruption, is a big tool that he's used is what I call confirmation bias. Of course, there's that. But there's another kind of bias. It's when you withhold information and you don't disclose it so that you can lead people to a certain conclusion. Omission. It's called omission bias. That and a plausible deniability. So those have been the primary tools that he uses. The omission bias, the detective uses that one a lot too. So what they'll do, like when somebody inquires of them, or if the news is getting hot and heavy and they want to diffuse it, what they'll do is they'll disclose the early documents. So the very first thing that came out, they'll show, well, this is true because this is what happened. But they fail to disclose that was refuted in court. That was proven to be wrong. That, they don't give anything that happened after that. It's the same with the DHS. As far as I know, my understanding is the DA has never apprised the judge of the 6 experts or given her copies of their assessments. and their credentials. I don't think DHS got it all, but he's got them all. We made sure that he had them all. So he knew. He knows he's the same one who was going to give us generous visitation to include holidays and sporting events, but yet call us and tell the public that we're these horrible people after he dismissed it. His argument is, well, we just didn't have enough evidence to prove it. Well, what do you call that? Called you treat people as innocent if they're not proven guilty. So that means you give their kids back. You don't kidnap their kids. So that's kind of, like I said, it wasn't going to be just a little. There's just been so many twists and turns over the last 7.5 years. So sorry I didn't give you the condensed version.
Honestly, I'm glad that you said the whole story, and I might monologue just for a second because there are a couple really important aspects of this to highlight in the way that this is unfolded, in a way that I think a lot of people might not be able to empathize with, and I think it's important that they do. I think there's an intuition for a lot of people when it comes to the law and when it comes to rules and regulations that they are looking out for you, and that you are innocent until proven guilty, and that if you kind of just throw your hands up and get taken by the system, that the system will figure itself out. And in that way, you kind of justify a lot of what the law is supposed to do for you and a lot of what these regulations are supposed to do with you. And I think that this is such a tragic example of when you trust and then your entire life gets ruined. And I'm not even talking about like a moment or a day. I'm talking about a continual fight that you and at least 6 other people are feeling on the deepest and most intimate level that you possibly could. And I think, especially when you look at it from, we can go by each individual person. So you and your husband had to spend 4 months in jail for a crime twice for a crime that you didn't commit, and 4 months, that's 120 days at least of jail that you're sitting in there waiting for freedom, waiting to see your family and to do these things, and you guys get 10-minute visitations for people to come in and talk to you. And right when you get out of jail, you have a public slander campaign against you, calling you murderers, calling you rapists, calling you just the worst things ever. And then the person who's accusing you of this looks you in the eyes and reveals to you that he doesn't actually care about the morality of what you did, because he's offering to give you visitations to the kid that he's accusing you guys of abusing and molesting, which I think is probably the most egregious part of this, is that this is such a silver bullet against what this person is trying to say. If they're making this case, they're trying to make this deal with you. Why on earth would you make a deal with a murderer and a child rapist? Why on earth would you do that? And that's just you two. Now look at it from the perspective of Clayton for a moment. And he's at school, and it's been 6 or 7 years for you guys, right?
7.5, yeah, almost 7.5.
Yes, 7.5 years that you guys have been missing your grandson, your child. And you were talking about the fear of him not remembering you. And I don't think people realize, especially developmentally, how giant of a hole 7 years is when you are growing up and missing those people. And all of that comes back to an initial bias and then just the way that a story is communicated. And that entire system of law just needs to get backed up once. And it's this traffic stop of people needing to communicate this thing so that this department can get a hold of the right information. Dang it. Are you telling me that that's 1 month that we just lost because of this mistake that somebody made or this thing that somebody lied about? And so if you have somebody starting this traffic jam at the beginning with a lie, with something that they are intentionally lying about, it pushes everything back, and that's how you miss your son for 7 years. And so I guess not to reiterate the entire story that you told, because it was told beautifully. I just think that there's a level of empathy and just like disgusting implications that will ruin lives and has ruined lives. And I just think that that aspect of the legal system is not understood effectively for people. Now, the only problem that I'm running into when I'm hearing your story and I'm hearing this aspect of it is I'm running into a little bit of problems with intentionality, the why behind it. Why DHS would want Clayton. Why DHS would want him to not be with the family. Why the DA officer would want to lie about it. Can you kind of just and I want to keep this relatively short so that we can move on to the next, a little bit to the future, but why? Like, why would they do this? What is the motivation for why they would act this way?
What we believe, and this is after watching things from a very unusual perspective. Most people watch things happen from the outside. We got to see the inner workings, what goes on behind the scenes, how they act when they're not in the public eye. So what I believe, this is what I believe happened, is that the detective, I've always had the sense that the detective and the sheriff were like, they wanted to make a name for themselves. Like a feeling of insignificance. They wanted to do something great, do something big, right? So they bring this to the detective, or the detective brings this to the DA, right? And then the DA also wants to have a high conviction rate, because then when it's time to get reelected, people say, oh, he's tough on crime. Look at that. He's got a 98% conviction rate, which we've learned to be suspect about. So we've learned over the years, if you see a conviction rate that high, take a step back, because you're always going to, when you throw out a net to catch fish, you're going to catch good ones with bad ones. Some of them are going to be mistakes. You're going to throw them back out, So it can't be perfect. I mean, the whole system is made up of people, deeply flawed people who have their own biases and have been raised with certain things that have molded the way they see things and the way they filter things and what the color glasses they're wearing. So I just think that for the DA, there was a big win in it. He hoped, I think, and that would help him with, being impressive and stuff. I think all of them were kind of like that. I think the DA is the primary person who deliberately has not pushed information to the other departments, and has kind of, I know they have some of it, but the sheriff's department has said, and not privately, that they won't look at evidence. They've had people ask them, why won't you look at evidence? Why won't you look at the 6 expert reports that refuted the podunk Tulsa ME, who's not even accredited? Why? And they have actually said, the sheriff's department has actually said, by law, we are prohibited from investigating and looking at any more once the ME renders her opinion. I heard that and I was just like, what? Most investigations don't even start until the MEs rendered their opinion, right? Which is an opinion too. They call it an opinion. So that was just bizarre. And the sheriff, he really put us in a lot of danger. I feel like he was very reckless. 5 months before they charged us with the murder and molestation of the baby, which was the second time we went to jail for 4 more months, he got on the air and he said, this is before charging us, right? Before even alleging those crimes. He gets on the news and he says, we know that one of them killed that baby. We know that one of them killed that baby. And, we're going to find out who it was. And then they have a flash, a zoom in on our house number. I know people know exactly where we live now, right? So after this, we are getting destroyed in the media. We're getting destroyed on social media, and we're getting death threats. People driving by, this kind of thing, and trying to scare us. And we're being harassed by sheriff's vehicles parking in front of our house, SUVs lined up in front of our house to try to scare us. And, we had to have one of our attorneys call the DA's office and said, call off your dogs. They have to stop harassing our clients. But so I just think that everybody just wanted to be somebody. And and I think that made them vulnerable. And it's amazing. You don't have to hardly have any qualifications to be a sheriff or to be a detective. Like I said, not even necessarily a college degree in some cases. High school, I think, and I'm not sure, maybe cleat training. But it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary because these people are just as human as anybody else, and they're deeply flawed, just like the rest of us. And they come in there with all their flaws. It's not like math. Or math is, this number and this number will always equal this number and always come out right. This whole system is made up of a whole bunch of different people, different ways of looking at things and different opinions, and that are all flawed. So a system made up of flawed human beings is going to be a deeply flawed system. So our justice system is not broken. At least the one here is shattered. I mean, it's shattered. And in our county, I would say it's almost unrecognizable. That's how shattered it is.
What can we do? What can the viewers do? How can we help? How can we spread the word? Like, what does the future look like for this situation, and how can people help?
Okay. Well, if you go to the Rescue Clayton website, you'll find the Saving Clayton documentary. Watch that. Kind of get, I told you a lot of it, but still get to see everyone in the family. You get to hear their take, and you get a lot more grasp on everything. Share it. Share the heck out of it. We want to put as much light on the situation as possible. We want to bring truth. Part of the reason the sheriff's office and the DA's office hate us so much is because we won't shut up. And it's not because we're so wonderful and brave, because we've had to press through a lot of fear to make ourselves not shut up, because we've had a lot of intimidation come against us. So, but your love for your child can drive you. Excuse me. Your love for your child can sometimes push you past your greatest fears. And so that's the thing that has just kept propelling us. The other thing I would say is the Attorney General. You can call him. You can leave a message. Make sure that, if you tell him you'd like this to be investigated, that this needs to be resolved, you can send emails. Send an email. Let him know you're concerned. Let him know that, you want to see justice and what can he do to help. I used to tell people to call the DA, but I realized that I think he's too far gone. He's never going to listen. So the judge, I used to encourage people to call the judge, but she's also so entrenched. So I would say that would be very important, is to contact the AG often. Until this is resolved. I would say don't call once, don't email once. I'd say call every week. Call every week. Let them know that this matters to you, that you're a concerned citizen. And we've got thousands and thousands of followers. And we just need people to stay on it. It's hard because when they successfully drag it out this long, part of the reason, is because they want to get everything past the statute of limitations so that you can't fight back. So it pays for them to let things drag out and drag out and drag out, and to stall and stuff. So when there's a county that's corrupt, that's one of the tools that often gets used. So I'd say those two things are probably the most important. There is an interim study taking place on the 28th at the Capitol building at 1:00 with DHS, what changes and improvements, suggestions from the people. About how we can improve DHS, even though I personally feel like it has to be completely upended and start over. But so that's open to the public. Anybody can go to that, show your concern. That would be a very good thing to go to attend and let your voice be heard. Sad there was another interim study by different senators a year and a half ago, and the DHS head director was supposed to attend it so she could hear the concerns of the people. But the night before the interview, she pulled out. So I'm like, great. Now here we have another situation that she quit. Well, people say that she was actually fired, and there's some good reasons. And then a new director stepped up. Now this director is we thought, going to be at this new interim study on the 28th. Just found out today that he's also pulling out. So it doesn't make sense to me, because if you're really all about children, about protecting children and not protecting the agency, I don't see how you can serve two masters. If you're going to be protecting the agency, you're not going to be protecting the children. And if you don't want to hear from your constituents and you don't want to hear from the people that you're supposed to be serving and protecting, something's not right about that. I would think that if you're all about protecting children, you're going to make sure that if there's a meeting like that where you can hear from people and hear from other experts, you're going to be there. So I invite people to that. And those are the first three things that come to me off the top of my head.
Yeah, wow. I'm really glad that you came on here to share the story and talk to people, and hopefully, obviously I'm going to be fighting to hopefully get this resolved, but I hope that people will continue to keep fighting as well. I want to give you the opportunity to kind of round us out, as we've been going on for a little bit over an hour now. I want to give you an opportunity to round us out, and you get the final words. If there are places you want to send people to, like links or websites or videos, I know you kind of mentioned it before, and if you want to summarize any points or just say some final words, this is kind of your opportunity to close this episode out.
I urge everyone to go to the website called Rescue Clayton, where you can find the Saving Clayton documentary. And there's also an evidence link. You can personally read the court transcripts. You can hear from both sides. You can look at the evidence. You can look at the autopsy results. You can see all that. You can see all the past media that's on there. Have at it, So I would say that, definitely. And then, of course, reaching out to the Attorney General, General Drummond, would be wonderful. Pass the word on, share it with as many people as you can. If there's, other people that are concerned, have them make those calls and send those emails. Share the documentary, share. It won its third award last year. It's not boring. It was showing in theaters last year, but now it's free. Anybody can go to YouTube and watch it, or go to the Rescue Clayton website and watch it. I'm not sure if there's any. I know when I get off, I'm going to think, oh, darn, I should have said.
Yeah, you can send me any links you want me to throw up on this too, and I'll make sure that people see it.
Yeah. So this whole thing of what our family walked through was kind of what my son calls his get off the couch moment. This is why he decided to run for state rep and won last year. And this is why so many of his bills have to do with things that are going to make things better for children, especially in foster care and in education. He was a school teacher for 9 years. So there's a real focus there, but he doesn't want to see, it can't help us necessarily, because it's not like these bills would be retroactive if they got passed, but it can help other people, that get caught in the system. It's, you think from the outside, oh, this can't be, this is just too fantastical, right? And that the legal system's there for your protection, which is the way we raised our children. They're here for your good, they're here for your protection. Just tell them the truth. We had no idea, but it's like when you don't know it until you get caught in the cogs of the machinery, and then your life gets in there, chewed up and spit out, and it's like, it's very disillusioning. I can remember one year I went through so much grieving, and what I was grieving was the picture I was raised with, the picture of what I thought life was like in our society, and what I thought the court system and the legal system was really all about. It was hard to let that die, and to be able to accept the fact that that's not always the situation. That's really hard. It's very painful, because you want to believe, just like you want to believe if you had a good childhood, that it was really good. You want somebody to come and shatter your illusion. So, yeah.
Yeah,
I can't think of it.
Just thank you so much, Lisa, for coming on. I know that this is never going to be easy to talk about, but I know that spreading the word is very good for this kind of cause. So thank you so much for coming on and telling people about this. And I hope and pray that the best comes to you and your family.
I appreciate it. Can I say hi to Clayton?
Absolutely.
Just in case. Oh. Clayton, we love you with all our heart and soul, and we will never stop fighting for you. You're the most important thing in our world. And if we die fighting, then that's what we'll do. But we're not going to let go. We love you with everything in us. And there's nothing that's going to stop us, and there's no one that's going to stop us from fighting for you. Until you come home, we will be fighting for you until you're in our arms again. And we can't wait for that day. It's going to be bigger than 50 Christmases put all together. Be the biggest celebration we've ever had. And we'll open it up to everybody. So, anyway, I love you, Clinton.
Paul, thank you so much.